Verbal persecution. When we share God's truth with those who have deliberately turned their backs on God, we should not be surprised if we are identified as stupid and crazy. Here's Gene.
This is not new. This has happened over the centuries. It happened to Hosea. It happened to the other prophets that were prophesying truth to the people of Israel. I call this predictable persecution, Hosea 9:7. The days of punishment have come. The days of retribution have come. Let Israel recognize it. Recognize what? Well, he answers that. The prophet is a fool, and the inspired man is insane because of the magnitude of your guilt and hostility. In other words, Hosea and other prophets were prophesying God's truth, and the children of Israel had deteriorated so much that they said to Hosea, "You are a fool. You are crazy." And you know, that wasn't a very fun experience for the prophets. And yet God called them to prophesy truth, even though they would be classified as out of their minds. And when I read that, I couldn't help but think of Paul's experience in Acts chapter 26, which is recorded by Luke, but this was Paul's experience as he was on his way he was captured, he was on his way to go to Rome to be imprisoned, and he had this opportunity in Caesarea to give his testimony before Festus, a governor. And we read this, as Luke recorded it, as he was making his defense this way, and there he was explaining what he was doing to this pagan governor, Festus exclaimed in a loud voice. Now, a loud voice means a loud voice. And right in the middle of his defense of what he was saying, what Paul was saying, Festus just shouted, "You are out of your mind. You're crazy." That was directed at the Apostle Paul. And then he went on to say, "Too much study is driving you mad." And notice the response. But Paul replied, and he did it with dignity. "I'm not out of my mind, most excellent Festus. On the contrary, I'm speaking words of truth and good judgment. What I'm sharing is coming from God, is not out of a crazy mind." Paul faced that experience. Now, what Paul faced was mild, really, compared with what Hosea and other prophets experienced in the Old Testament. But the fact of the matter is that when we share God's truth, and let me just restate the principle because the principle addresses the reality. When we share God's truth with those who have deliberately turned their backs on God, we should not be surprised if we are identified as stupid and crazy. They may not use those words, but that perhaps is what they mean. So here's the question for application, reflection, response. In what ways are we seeing this kind of persecution in various cultures today? Well, let me answer that question with a question. Have you seen the trend in our culture and our society? Have you seen, for example, that Christians, Bible-believing Christians, are often the brunt of jokes on talk shows? Or video presentations, maybe some of them cartoonish presentations that literally make fun of Jesus, literally make fun of Jesus Christ and call him a fool or call people fools who follow Jesus Christ. That's happening in our television networks today. Think about the secular campus. What it's compared like today versus what it was in years past. I had the privilege of studying and doing my doctorate at New York University. And I was in a religion department. And I have to say, and that was years and years ago, that in that experience they were truly liberal. Because in that situation, I had the opportunity to express what I believed without making fun of me. That's true liberalism. Today, we're living in a liberalism that is so far to the left that it's become to the right and is intolerable of anybody who disagrees with them. They're ultimately fundamentalistic in their liberalism against anyone who shares any thoughts or ideas or beliefs other than their own. And don't be surprised if they call you stupid and ignorant for believing the Bible is the Word of God. How could anybody in his right mind believe the Bible? That's happening today more than it's ever happened on our college campuses. And our young people need to be prepared for that. Because just like Hosea of old, they're going to be, if the words are not used, this is exactly what it means. You're crazy. You're out of your mind. You're stupid. And so that's why we really need to put on the full armor of God, because I believe that what we're seeing in our culture today is just the beginning of what's going to happen in our culture and our society. And what we need to do is put on the whole armor of God and pray and trust God that we will never, ever be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ.